The next area I wanted to touch on is an area that was actually brought up to us by a couple of auditors and relates to communication between tier 1 and that should say 2 suppliers. So there are a couple of areas within the HARPS standard that actually rely on communication between tier 1 and tier 2. And this includes the distribution of specifications. So if your tier 1 supplier is accessing perhaps retailer portals to get an identification of what those specifications are, it really is important that they're sharing with you those specifications or delivering a spec that meets the requirement of the retailers. This is also true for packaging and labeling as well. So some of the feedback that we've received from auditors is that there is such limited communication between tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers, less so out in industry and in particular pockets, but more so around the role of the market agent and what's happening in terms of sending that communication through. Tier 2 suppliers are really encourage you to chat to your agents or tier 1s to try and get this information. So let those discussions broaden around what the expectations are of you and your business. And they could be really, really helpful in setting some clarity around what those goals are. It's really helpful also around shelf life validation and retention sampling that we just touched on earlier, as well as the mock recall process. It's an ideal opportunity to be working with your tier 1 and getting a full comprehensive understanding of what to do in a situation like a recall or withdrawal and how to see through that process. And finally, in relation to product testing, so that could be MRL testing or micro testing, understanding whose role it is to collect that sample and how often, as an example. So I'm sure it's no surprise to you that communication is really, really important, but it can help support your long-term goals and actually helps to develop trust between your relationships so that both parties are actually more comfortable sharing information and working together. And if you want some ideas and tips on how other suppliers have done it and you'd like to talk to me about that and what are some success factors in, I never hear from my agent or I never hear from my wholesaler, how do I actually spark that communication? Again, we can give you some examples of how to communicate with them and the best way to have those conversations to meet your goals in meeting the standard.